Have you ever wondered why some people can spend their entire life surrounded by family, friends, even a loving partner, yet still feel a quiet emptiness, as if nobody truly knows them? Imagine sitting at the dinner table, smiling, nodding, but deep inside, feeling invisible. It's a silent kind of loneliness, and here is the scary part. This hidden emptiness is often not about who you are with today, but about something that happened decades ago. In your very first relationships as a child. I'm Tom Harris, and I've spent many years studying how the mind, emotions, and human connection work. I want to speak to you today with care, because what we're going to explore may sound uncomfortably familiar. You see, there is a pattern of attachment that quietly shapes lives. It pushes people away even when what they want most is closeness. And the worst part, many people never even realize they are carrying it now. Don't worry, we are not rushing into heavy theories. Think of this conversation like sitting together in a calm room, sharing stories. I want you to feel comfortable. I will guide you step by step, and I promise, by the end of our time together, you will have a clearer picture not only of why certain relationships feel distant, but also how to gently begin changing that. But let's not close the mystery just yet. Before we go deeper, ask yourself this: why is it that some people avoid intimacy even when they say they want love? Why do they put up invisible walls without knowing it? Hold on to that thought, because as we go through these signs one by one, you might notice pieces of your own life, or perhaps the life of someone close to you, quietly reflected back. Asterisk, when we think about childhood, many imagine laughter, play, and warmth. But for some, the picture is very different. Emotional neglect doesn't always mean something dramatic or visible. Sometimes, it looks like parents providing food, shelter, even good education, yet quietly ignoring the feelings of their child. Maybe when the child cried, they were told, "Stop that, you're too sensitive." Or when they felt scared, the answer was silence, as if their emotions didn't matter at all. This kind of environment sends a hidden message that emotions are inconvenient, maybe even wrong. And when that message repeats day after day, year after year, the child learns to hide their true feelings. They grow up believing it's safer to lock emotions away than to risk being judged or dismissed. Now, imagine carrying that silent lesson into adult life. Picture someone who never shares their worries because they expect no one will listen, or someone who smiles politely at family gatherings, while inside they are holding back tears they don't think anyone wants to see. Emotional neglect in childhood doesn't just fade with time, it becomes the foundation of how we connect, or fail to connect later in life. Have you ever noticed this pattern in people around you? Perhaps even in yourself? Keep that thought, because the next sign reveals what happens when these hidden lessons about emotions continue into adulthood. Asterisk, when a child grows up in an environment where emotions are ignored or dismissed, they don't just forget those feelings, they learn to bury them. Suppressing emotions becomes a survival skill. Think about it. If every time you cried, someone told you to stop, or every time you were scared, no one comforted you, wouldn't you eventually decide that showing emotions only brings pain? As adults, this pattern shows up in subtle but powerful ways. Instead of saying, "I'm hurt," they say, "I'm fine." Instead of admitting they're lonely, they keep busy, filling the silence with work, TV, or endless tasks. Vulnerability begins to look like weakness, something dangerous to avoid. But here's the irony: suppressing emotions doesn't make them disappear. It's like shaking a soda can and then putting it back on the shelf. The pressure builds quietly, until one day it bursts out in unexpected anger, frustration, or even health problems. And maybe you've seen this before. Someone who seems calm and composed, but suddenly has an outburst over something small. Or someone who laughs off pain, yet later admits they feel completely drained. That's the hidden cost of suppressing emotions. Now, let me ask you, what happens to relationships when one person is always hiding their true self? In just a moment, we'll see why emotional intimacy becomes such a difficult step for them. Asterisk, emotional intimacy is not just about romance. It's about being able to share your inner world with another person. But for someone with an avoidant attachment style, this step feels almost impossible. They may enjoy spending time with others, but the moment conversations go deeper, when feelings, fears, or personal struggles come up, they start to retreat. Imagine sitting with a friend who gently asks, "How are you really doing?" For most people, that's an invitation to open up. But for someone carrying avoidant patterns, it feels like a trap. Their heart races, their mind looks for escape routes, and often they change the subject or make a joke to shift attention away. This isn't because they don't care. In fact, many long for closeness. But closeness feels unsafe, almost like stepping into unknown territory without a map. Years of learning to suppress emotions have made sharing them feel like speaking a language they never practiced. So they keep conversations on safe topics, whether news, hobbies, anything, but the raw truth of how they feel. Partners and family members often notice this distance and sometimes misinterpret it as coldness. But the truth is, it's not coldness. It's fear. Fear that if they open up, the response will be rejection or indifference, just like in childhood. And that fear leads directly to another sign building walls with extreme boundaries. Asterisk boundaries are healthy. They protect our time, our energy, and our well-being. But for someone with avoidant attachment, boundaries can become more like walls, so tall and so thick that no one can get through. Instead of a gentle fence with a gate, it feels like a fortress built to keep everyone at a safe distance. Picture this. A friend calls and says, "Let's meet for coffee. I'd love to catch up." The avoidant person might instantly feel pressure. In their mind, coffee isn't just coffee. It's the risk of someone asking questions that touch on feelings. So, they decline politely, saying, "I'm busy," or they keep the meeting short, always controlling how much access others have. Sometimes, they even create rules for themselves. Never share too much, don't get too close, always have an exit. These strict boundaries look like independence, but deep down, they are shields against the possibility of being hurt. And here's where it gets interesting. This distance can confuse people around them. Friends may think, do they even like me? Partners may wonder, why won't they let me in? It's not about dislike, it's about fear disguised as control. Now, what happens to relationships when walls are always up? They tend to stay shallow, and that's exactly where we're heading next. Asterisk, when someone keeps strong walls around their emotions, their relationships often remain shallow. They may have many acquaintances, plenty of social interactions, even attend family gatherings, but the connections stay on the surface. Conversations revolve around safe topics, sports, news, weather, hobbies. Rarely does it touch the vulnerable side of life. Think of it like swimming in the shallow end of a pool. It feels safe, predictable, and you can always stand on your feet. But you never experience the depth of floating freely in deeper water. For avoidant individuals, staying in that shallow space feels easier than risking the unknown depth of intimacy. This pattern often leaves partners or close family members feeling frustrated. They might say, "I know you, but I don't really know you." The avoidant person may respond with confusion, "But I'm here, I talk, I do everything a good partner should." What they don't realize is that presence without openness feels like distance. Over time, shallow relationships can create a cycle of loneliness. The avoidant person avoids deep bonds, but then feels unseen and misunderstood. And instead of breaking the pattern, they often retreat even further. But here's the twist. This avoidance doesn't come only from fear. Sometimes it's tied to a powerful belief. I must stand on my own, no matter what. That belief shapes the next sign-strong independence. Independence is usually celebrated. Being able to solve your own problems, manage your life, and not rely too much on others sounds admirable. But for someone with avoidant attachment, independence often goes beyond healthy. It becomes extreme. It's less about strength and more about survival. Imagine a child who learned early that asking for comfort only led to disappointment. Over time, that child decides, "I don't need anyone. I'll do everything myself." Fast forward to adulthood, and you see a person who refuses help, even when they're struggling. If the car breaks down, they'd rather spend hours fixing it alone than call a friend. If they're sick, they hide it, insisting, "I'll be fine." On the surface, this looks like confidence, but deep down, it's fueled by a belief that depending on others is dangerous. Accepting help feels risky, because what if the other person lets them down? What if they judge them for being weak? So, instead of risking vulnerability, they choose self-reliance, no matter the cost. The hidden cost, though, is isolation. When you push everyone away under the banner of independence, you'll also push away support, care, and connection. And that lack of trust in others leads us to the next sign: struggling with trust itself. Trust is the foundation of any close relationship. But for someone with an avoidant attachment style, trust often feels fragile, even dangerous. Deep inside, there's a voice whispering, "Don't rely on anyone, they'll only let you down." This voice comes from early experiences where love felt conditional, inconsistent, or absent. So, as adults, they keep people at arm's length. When a partner shows affection, instead of enjoying it, they might question it. Do they really mean this? Are they going to change their mind? And when someone offers help, the avoidant person may hesitate or even reject it, thinking, "What if I owe them later? What if they use it against me?" This constant doubt creates a push and pull dynamic. On one hand, they long for closeness, but on the other, they're suspicious of it. They may check for hidden motives, overanalyze small actions, or assume betrayal is just around the corner. For friends, partners, or family, this feels confusing. They might think, "I'm trying to love you. Why don't you believe me?" But for the avoidant person, trust is not simple. It's a battle between the desire to connect and the fear of being hurt again and often. This inner battle shows up in another powerful way, being overly critical both of themselves and of others. One of the most painful signs of avoidant attachment is the habit of being overly critical. This criticism usually has two directions: inward toward themselves and outward toward others. It often begins with the inner voice they grew up with, the voice that said, "You're too emotional, you should be stronger, or you'll never be good enough." Over time, that voice becomes their own, repeating in their head like a harsh echo. So, as adults, they may constantly judge themselves. A small mistake feels like a huge failure. A moment of sadness feels like weakness. And because they hold themselves to impossible standards, they sometimes turn that same lens on others. They might notice flaws quickly, point out shortcomings, or quietly think, "Why can't they just get it right?" But here's the truth. This critical mindset is really a shield. By focusing on faults, they keep people at a distance. If you believe no one is good enough, then you never have to risk opening your heart. Of course, this creates loneliness. Relationships become filled with judgment instead of compassion, and that judgment pushes people away. Yet, here's where things can change. Recognizing this pattern is the very first step toward healing. Now that we've explored all 8 signs, let's gently bring everything together in a recap, so you can see the full picture clearly. We've just walked through 8 powerful signs of avoidant attachment. Let's take a gentle breath and put the pieces together. It often begins with emotional neglect in childhood, where feelings were dismissed. From there, people learn to suppress emotions, hiding them away. That makes emotional intimacy difficult, because sharing feels unsafe. To protect themselves, they build extreme boundaries, and as a result, relationships often stay shallow. Then comes strong independence, the belief that they must do everything alone. Trust issues grow from that, making closeness feel risky. And finally, the habit of being critical of self and others keeps connections cold and distant. Now, I know for many of you, especially if you've lived more than 60 years carrying some of these patterns, this might feel heavy. But here's the hopeful part. Awareness is the very first step toward change. Simply recognizing these signs in yourself or in someone you love can open the door to healing. Small steps like allowing yourself to share one honest feeling, or choosing to trust just a little can begin to soften those old walls. If you found yourself in these descriptions, you're not alone. Millions of people carry these invisible patterns. And here, together, we can learn to replace avoidance with connection. If this conversation spoke to you, I invite you to stay with this channel. Subscribe, share it with someone who might need it, and keep walking with me on this journey toward healthier, warmer relationships.